Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the Canon XF400 and 405 video training series. In this video, setting up for shooting part 1, we're going to be talking about using the custom button and dial. We're also going to be talking about shooting modes and the function menu on the camera system. So let's get started. So let's go over here to the custom button. Now, it may be a little confusing initially because this button and this dial can do many things when you're using the camera system. First thing I'm going to do is just hold that button down, and we're going to be presented with a menu that's going to give us choices. By default, it's off, but I can take this dial and I can actually rotate the dial and choose the 3 options that I have. So one of them is exposure compensation, where we can go ahead and use the dial to change exposure compensation. One of them is automatic gain control limit, so we can change the limit of automatic gain control when you're letting the camera make choices in terms of the sensitivity that is being applied to what you're shooting. And the third one is the TV AV-M setting. And this is the one that most people are going to actually choose most of the time when they're using the dial. So I'm going to go ahead and press the custom button again. And if you look up here on the top left of the touchscreen, you'll see an M, and that's because my camera or my shooting mode is set to manual. And I'm just going to go ahead and press that custom button again. And again, remember, we're on TV AV-M. This is dynamic. It will change depending on how you have your shooting mode set up. So right now, with it set up this way in manual, if I press the custom button, it will cycle through my f-stop, my shutter setting, and also my gain setting or sensitivity. So if I go over here and I choose my aperture and then I take the dial and I dial it up or down, it's going to basically open or close that iris. If I then press it again, I can change my shutter. And if I press it again, I can go ahead and change my gain settings. So now if I go into my modes, we can see that there are a whole bunch of additional choices here. And these are designed to help you as a shooter when you don't want to use the camera in manual mode, to be able to allow the camera to make certain choices for you based on shooting conditions or on certain settings that you want to have control of, and then you want to let the camera make other decisions for you. So for instance, let's say you're shooting outside in an environment that would be similar to a beach. So you've got really, really bright sunlight. Obviously, that's bouncing off of the sand, and you've got those types of shooting conditions. Well, there's a preset for that, which will make decisions for you when you're shooting that way. Let's say, for instance, you're shooting in an environment where you have a lot of high-speed action, sports. Then the camera's going to make decisions for you there that might have more to do with shutter speed than it would having to do with other exposure choices. And then another example might be choosing aperture priority. So if we choose AV for aperture priority and then I step out of the menu, you will see that the only choice I now have with my dial is to change the aperture. And that means that the camera is making other decisions for me, usually in regards to my shutter speed and also in terms of gain. So this gives you an enormous amount of control in terms of how much or how little you want the camera to do for you when you're actually using it when shooting. Now we're going to take a look at the function menu, and to me that's the secret sauce for the 400 and the 405. And it, just like the camera modes, changes based on, well, your camera mode. So if I choose, let's say, that beach setting inside of my modes, and now I go to the function menu, I am presented with a certain number of choices in terms of what I can access because of that mode. If I go back into my modes and I choose manual, and I step out of there and I go into the function menu, you will now see I have additional choices in terms of what I can do in the camera system. Now, we're going to talk about iris first, and anybody who's used a camera knows that's changing our aperture. This particular camera on the wide end is an f2.8, and then it ramps to an f4.8 as you get closer to the long end of the lens. So you can see here, if I just go to the widest shot that we have here, I can just touch the screen and I can open that up to an f2.8. So that's our aperture at 2.8 on the wide end. Let me just go ahead and zoom all the way to the end of the lens. And then if I touch the screen, because it's ramped to an f4.8, and I select that, now when I zoom in and out, it will actually lock that aperture in so it's not ramping. So additionally, under iris, we have zebra settings, and I can go in here and choose either 70% or 100%. Generally, I would set this to 100% in most shooting scenarios just to make sure I'm not blowing out my highlights. As soon as I see those zebras at 100%, I'll back off a little bit. And then a lot of people also like to use 70% zebras in their shooting. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. And then I'm going to go into our shutter settings. And you can see here that under shutter, we can also still access those zebra settings. So it's not the only place that you can get to them. But shutter is basically just like our aperture is done with the touchscreen. So we can very easily just set that in. Right now we're shooting at 23.98, so I have my shutter speed set to a 1/48. If we were, let's say for instance, shooting at 60 frames per second, we would usually, for high speed, set that to a 1/120th. So it just depends on how you're shooting with the camera, but I'm just going to go ahead and put that to a 1/48th again for my shutter. So let's just keep going here. We've got gain settings here. So this is where we're basically changing the sensitivity. And one of the things that I've really noticed about this particular camera system is, unlike previous small sensor cameras that I've used, because this has this new 1-inch chip and it is designed to shoot in things like YDR, and the sensitivity is just so much better, I'm finding that I can comfortably go all the way up to 18 dB and even slightly above, and I'm not really seeing the noise that I would expect out of a camera like this. And when we talk about gain, just so you know, every 6 decibels of gain is 1 stop. So when we go from 0 dB gain to 6 dB gain, then we're basically increasing our sensitivity of our camera by 1 stop. If we go by 3 dB, that's a half a stop. So 9 dB is 1.5 stops, 12 dB is 2, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to go in here to our white balance settings. You should be familiar with these. Right now, this environment is lit with daylight. So we have the daylight setting set up. We also have tungsten. You can dial in your color temperature. You have custom white balance settings 1 and 2. So you can actually save those. And then we also have, of course, automatic white balance. So I'm just going to leave this on daylight for now. We have this, which is called backlight compensation. And this is really for situations where you may be, let's say, outside and the sun is behind somebody and they're being backlit. The camera can help you make some decisions in terms of making sure you get exposure on your subject matter. So you can either keep that off or have that always on, depending on your shooting environment. We're going to go down to the next option, which has to do with focus. And we have 2 options, A for automatic and M for manual. And if I just pan the camera here, you'll see that if it's on automatic, then the camera will automatically change the focus. And you can see how that works. If I switch it over to manual, then I can touch focus here and very quickly access that through this function menu. Additionally, when we're using this menu, we can also access our peaking options. So we can go in and turn on peaking, and then when peaking is on, we can choose whether or not we want the peaking to basically be yellow, blue, or red. And so we access that there. Let's go back into the function menu again, and I'm going to scroll down. And in manual, we still have 4 more options. The first one is magnification. If I activate that, we have a touch screen here where we can move around the frame. And then I can go ahead and I can change my focus in terms of my object. I'll step out of there. So let's take a look at our zoom options. If I go into here, what's really nice about this is it's very granular. So let's say I'm zoomed all the way in right now, and on the wide side, I press on the first section here, and then I hold it down. It will zoom out at a very, very slow speed. Whereas if I press over here on the left-hand side of it, and hold it down, it will zoom out very, very quickly. So you have granular control in terms of what you do. And then of course in the middle, it's somewhere in between. We also have two other options right here in this function menu. We can press the record button and it will actually start recording from the touch screen, and we can stop that. And if we needed to take a photo for a reference frame for something, we could do that by pressing the photo button. Our second to last option when we're in manual mode and we're in the function menu has to do with our camera's looks. And we have three look options in here. The first one here is our standard image profile, which is what you would use in standard shooting scenarios. The second one is the one that I'm most interested in with the camera, which is wide dynamic range. And this gives you an 800% dynamic range in terms of your gamma curve on the camera system. So it's much, much better when you're shooting in situations where you have and need to hold a larger contrast image. So you've got more information in the highlights and in the shadows. I would tend to use wide DR for that. And then the last one that we have here is black and white. It's a monochrome option. So we can switch that over to that and use it. Now let's just go over to our wide DR look, and we'll see that there's a separate menu here. And when we go in, we can change for wide DR our sharpness. You might want to turn that all the way down if you wanted to add sharpness in post-production. And you can also increase or decrease your overall color depth. Now, if I went to look 1, our standard look, you will see that I have an additional option. I now have not only sharpness and color depth, I have contrast, which you might need to dial in if you're using standard, but when we're using wide dynamic range, we're already getting that wider dynamic range, so you can tweak that in post-production. The last option that I have right now with the camera set to manual mode in this function menu has to do with audio. And when I press that, it's just showing me my audio channels and what's going on. Currently, I have the camera set to manual and we have the audio turned all the way down. But if I turned my camera to auto for automatic gain control, you will now see that we're seeing meters here on this menu. So that's the custom button and dial, the modes, and the function menu on the XF400 and 405. Thanks for watching.